Hello, we're excited to have you join us today for the Regulating with AI session at FedTalks. I'm Dave Nyczepir, and I'm a tech reporter at FedScoop. Joining me today are Charles Keckler, Senior Advisor in the Immediate Office of the Secretary at the Department of Health and Human Services, and Brent Schroeder, Chief Technology Officer at SUSE. I won't spend too much time on an introduction, but suffice to say that HHS has been hard at work cleaning and integrating data that cognitive tech can use in its business processes. At the same time, the department has found itself regulating medical devices, sponsoring AI research, and trying to develop communities of practice. We'll dive into all of that today. I wanted to start out, Charles, by asking you, though, how is HHS approaching artificial intelligence adoption, and where might it be applicable?
Well, it's applicable in a lot of areas, David. And so, of course, as we all know, HHS is a very big department with a lot of divisions, and the different divisions and elements of the department have been engaged in AI for some time with individual projects at FDA, at NIH, and other places. One thing that we're looking at doing this year, though, is gathering together the many disparate projects, as well as the guidance from the Office of Management and Budget and other federal-wide guidance, in integrating those to work towards an enterprise AI strategy that can help coordinate the activities that are already ongoing around the department.
And Brent, I'm curious to get your thoughts as well, just on applicability and where you see potential for use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something like HHS and just the number of agencies and the size of data that they deal with absolutely lends themselves to utilization of AI. If you think about the population of the United States and the number of constituents that HHS is supporting, the number of agencies, it just seems to lend itself very well, both on the data availability and the problems that would fit AI very well.
The next question I wanted to ask you both is, how might HHS handle its data to pave the way for AI and also prevent it from becoming a barrier to adoption?
Well, data obviously is the fuel for AI, and we generate a lot of data here and a lot of different kinds of data, and this is where AI comes in of a particular importance. There's structured data, there's a lot of unstructured data, we have a lot of textual data in a variety of different fields, and the ability to combine data sets and to develop analytics from that is where AI can show its strength. But in order for that to do that, you've actually got to combine the data sets and actually have the kinds of data sharing that is necessary across different divisions in the department. And that's one thing that we've been working towards for a few years now, is data sharing and data availability. And so those things are really sort of preconditions, or anyway, they're projects that need to be done in conjunction with the development of the analytics for that data.
Yeah, I want to echo what Charles said. I've spoken a number of times to different technology leaders in various agencies. And like we've already said, there's tremendous amounts of data, but for numerous reasons, some valid and some becoming outdated, they aren't able to fully share and aggregate it across data, which really inhibits, achieving the maximum usage of that. So, I'm really looking forward, as Charles points out, of agencies working together to be able to pull that data together and get the full use out of it. There's one other element I'll comment on very quickly, because it applies in the data itself and in the application of the models is bias. I think one of the things that's really important in the data is to keep it clean and manage the bias, because once bias kind of creeps into the data, then when we think about barriers to adoption, if there's not trust in that data and that it could produce distorted results, then I think that will become an inhibitor to the breadth of adoption that's possible.
I'm glad you brought up trustworthy AI too. It's a hot topic across agencies right now. I literally wrote a story about it yesterday on how NIST is tackling the subject and expected to be rolling out guidance soon in sort of a methodical fashion on various aspects, technical requirements tied to trustworthy AI. So the next question I want to ask is just how important is it to HHS that AI be trustworthy? And then Brent, maybe you can kind of chime in with what you see trustworthy AI as entailing.
Yeah, so we had a chance to discuss with subject matter experts and stakeholders across the department in preparation for our AI strategy this summer with a couple of extended convening sessions, multi-hour convening sessions to talk about where our AI situation is currently and to get prospects for the future. And one of the things that we focused on were, what people want, what are the pain points, what are the concerns for AI, and trust in AI, trustworthy AI was absolutely the number one finding from these convening sessions in terms of what the participants were really concerned about. And so it's clearly of sort of key importance. It's something that we have to solve and have to have be a central element of our strategy. And it's partly to get that the participants thought, well, I want, of course, to trust the AI that I'm doing, but I also need to have the public trust what I'm doing. If I'm going to be using AI, I need to be trustworthy as a user and a developer of AI. The public needs to understand it, to have confidence in it, as well as my colleagues within the department. So it's an important topic that we're making a strong pillar of our AI strategy.
Yeah. You talk about what is trust. I see two aspects of trust. And familiar with what NIST is working on in this trustworthy AI as one of them. Do I trust it will work predictably and couldn't kind of lead me down the strange anomalous behaviors? The other aspect to it is do I trust how the model is coming to its conclusions? There's this notion of a black box or a more transparent accessibility to the model. And I think that's important that, those around it, those constituents involved, particularly when we're talking about topics that fall into HHS, it's a lot about personal information and privacy information or information we want to keep private. So, having some trust in how the model came to that conclusion and being able to prove that it doesn't have bias in how it comes to those conclusions, and that it's open and visible to not only those developing the model and working with it, but those that the model is serving, so that there's a degree of trust in that. Back on the NIST side of it, there's an interesting scenario in what NIST is talking about, in that it's one thing when everything's working as I designed a model. Here's well-structured data and the data's coming in and everything looks good, and so the model is just working. But what happens and how does it behave when something really unexpected occurs? And there I think everybody needs to be able to trust that it will behave reasonably, and it will itself raise a flag when all of a sudden the data doesn't match what it was expecting.
Yeah, I would add one more thing on that, which is, part of the discussion now really is about human AI pairing and about developing that and being very deliberate about that. And that can be supportive of trustworthy AI, I think, because, as subject matter experts use cognitive technologies to actually augment their job, to help them do the job that they're doing better, I think that can build up confidence in use cases and seeing, yes, this is where I wanted to come, where I
Yeah.
I thought I could come. The AI is just helping me achieve it. And that's, I think, a way, it doesn't cover all use cases, but that's a way that we can build, I think, trustworthy AI in a number of applications.
Yeah, that's a great point, Charles.
One other subject that I wanted to touch on is almost inescapable. Obviously, we continue to be in a coronavirus pandemic, and I'm curious how sort of the tackling of this pandemic at your agency has accelerated the preconditions for using cognitive tech.
Well, one way certainly is that, to reference back to what Brent was talking about data sharing, in an emergency, it's the department is like any other organization. It comes together, to help tackle something like an emergency. And so the ability to share data and concerns that people had, they're, more willing to sort of find ways past that and to do that. And that provides a lot of opportunity, and just the need to innovate is helping drive that and making it more available, people more willing to sort of go out and try something new. I would say that that's sort of in the medium term and as part of our response. I think in the longer term, what we're seeing are trends, including the virtualization of healthcare. Just what we're doing today, we're doing government work much more on video, electronically. It's electronically mediated. The field now of healthcare provisions electronically mediated, and that's driving these high levels of data that are potentially available in the longer term for AI, both in terms of doing government work as well as in the healthcare field. So those are sort of the long-term sort of trends that might come about.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Charles said. There's the saying that necessity is the mother of invention, and we've had all the necessity we could possibly want in the last few months. I think it really forced organizations to try things they may not have tried for months or even years, in a different environment. So I think on the other side, we're going to see significant benefits. Where things were successful, the collaboration was successful, breaking things down into smaller problems, and rather than trying to have a grandiose strategy where we want to solve all problems at one time, tackling the problem and making progress on that, and then iterating on it, I think are all things that happened during this pandemic, and will continue on. And so I think it puts us significantly ahead as a society over where we would have been otherwise in the applying of the technology to these particular problems.
Now, sticking with this sort of theme, I'm curious, do you think there's any major sort of lessons learned from sort of this period of time that we've been in when it comes to AI?
I think that one lesson that we can take away is that that necessity of innovating, right? On the one hand, necessity drives people to innovate, but the need for innovation is there whether or not the necessity has arisen. So, if we look back and we say, and it's always hard to do, to say, hey, if we had been more innovative, if we'd structured this, if we'd moved forward with AI, we would have been better prepared, and we would have had those muscles to collaborate, to innovate, to share data, to make that data available for analytics. I think that idea of continuous improvement and openness to innovation is something that you want to retain outside of the emergency context, so that just for general purposes, but certainly when the next emergency occurs.
Yeah. There's another thing I've seen that, I wouldn't call it unique, but again, kind of forced on us or due to the urgency is the collaboration between the agencies and the private sector. That just, it had to go up, because we had to get supplies, reallocated, repositioned. We had to get resources that were being used for one function, repurposed to another, in days and weeks. And that collaboration between the public sector and private sector, I would say, I was talking to somebody else earlier, a couple of weeks ago, that I think we've seen a collaboration between public and private that hasn't been seen since World War II. And I'm hoping that that's a lesson learned, that, hey, we'd forgotten what we can accomplish and how efficiently we can do things when we bring that together and work together better, versus viewing them in totally separate camps and working in isolation from one another.
Well, we're closing in on the end of our time, so I just wanted to get any final thoughts you two had about AI in general, or maybe AI at HHS. Any takeaways you want the audience to have?
Well, it's been a great conversation. I would add that, one of the things that we're taking away or finding is that, AI is a great opportunity to make the best use of government resources. We have complex problems. We have a lot of data sitting around that people have really invested in and put their work into it, but it's sitting, it's dormant. And AI is an opportunity to take these things that are just sitting in a file somewhere and to bring that up for use going forward. And so that's one of the hopes that I have for AI in HHS and in the federal government more generally.
And I think if I was to think of one of the major aspects that I want people to take away or think about AI, going forward is, I think there's often that fear from multiple factors of is it accurate, is it biased, is it taking away jobs, etc. And I think the more we apply it and the more we see the benefits, I hope those fears go down in the excitement and the enthusiasm of learning how to apply it for the benefit, and not letting the risks overwhelm us and keep us from achieving and realizing the benefits that are to come. Every technology transition has risks. We've got to manage the risks, but then take advantage of the opportunities and the capabilities that it brings.
That's a great point, and I want to thank you both for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and I want to thank our audience as well for tuning in. We hope you all enjoy the rest of FedTalks.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Charles.